What have you heard about the afterlife in Greek mythology? What if the world of the dead was not a distant myth, but a real place you could actually visit? A place the ancient Greeks knew awaited every single soul, with its own unique landscape and set of rules. Picture a real where even the mightiest kings and the humblest commoners have to deal with a dark and twisted bureaucracy just to get through. That passage has now begun. The familiar sounds of your world begin to recede, like a tide pulling away from a silent shore. You are now a shade, a whisper of your former self, standing at the precipice of a journey all mortals must take. As you get ready to embark on this path, I'm curious, where are you tuning in from tonight? What time is it in your little corner of the world? It's pretty amazing to think about all of us cozying up for this story together from every corner of the globe. So find a comfortable spot, close your eyes, and let us begin our descent. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you unwind and gently fall asleep. Tonight, in Bedtime History, we begin not with monsters or gods, but in a quiet room in ancient Athens. Here, a life has just ended. The most important journey of all is about to commence. The first steps are not taken by the dead, but by the living. In the gentle quiet of the home, a profound stillness has fallen. A life has departed, leaving behind a silence that is heavier than any sound. The soul, the ancient Greeks called it the psyche, has become untethered. It is a concept as delicate as a puff of wind, a final warm breath that has just left the body. This psyche now lingers, confused and voiceless, a whisper in the world it once knew. It is present, yet unseen. It is a silent observer to the final acts of love and duty that will now unfold. Without these acts, this soul is lost. It is doomed to wander, trapped between worlds, a restless and sorrowful phantom. So the family begins its sacred work, not just to mourn, but to ensure a safe passage. The first of these rituals is the prothesis. This is the formal laying out of the body, a solemn 2-day vigil. The deceased is brought to the central courtyard, or the main room of the house. They are placed upon a high bier, a funeral couch with ornate legs, so all who enter may see them one last time. The women of the household, their faces etched with a grief that is both personal and deeply ritualistic, take charge. Their hands are gentle, yet purposeful. They first perform the washing, with clay basins of cool water. Infused with fragrant herbs, they carefully cleanse the body. This is not merely a physical act. It is a purification, a ritual cleansing that prepares the vessel for its final journey, even as the soul that once inhabited it watches on. The air fills with the sharp, clean scent of funerary herbs, mixed with something sweeter, a perfume to honor the departed. Once cleansed, the anointing begins. Olive oil, the lifeblood of Athenian society, is used. It is a rich, golden liquid that is carefully rubbed into the skin. The scent is unmistakable. It is earthy and sweet, a fragrance of life, used here in the service of death. The oil brings a soft sheen to the cooling skin, a final illusion of vitality under the soft, flickering light of nearby lamps. These oil lamps, simple clay discs with a spout for a wick, cast long, dancing shadows across the room. The shadows play on the walls, making the familiar space seem strange and otherworldly. They stretch and retreat, as if the boundary between the living and the dead is already beginning to blur. The body is then dressed, not in the colorful garments of daily life, but in simple, clean, white burial robes. Sometimes, a beautiful wreath of laurel or celery is placed upon the head, a final, fading crown. The cloth of the shroud is often linen, its texture rough but honest against the skin. It is a humble garment for a journey that strips away all earthly status. King and commoner are equal now. Then comes the most vital, and perhaps most chilling, part of the preparation. The family must provide the ferryman's fee, a single, small coin, usually an obolos, of low value, is chosen. One of the women, perhaps the mother or the wife, will gently part the lips of the deceased. She places the cold, metal disc inside the mouth, perhaps resting it on the tongue. The sensation, for any who might imagine it, is one of ultimate finality. The chilling feel of the coin, a piece of the mortal world, is the first tangible connection to the bureaucracy of the next. This small offering is everything. It is the key, the price of passage, the one thing that will satisfy the grim ferryman who waits by the dark river. With the body prepared, the formal mourning can commence. The prothesis is a public affair. Friends, relatives, and neighbors arrive to pay their respects. They see the body laid out with care and know that the family has fulfilled its duty. For 2 days, the house is a place of profound and performative grief. The ritual lamentations, led by the women, are the heart of this mourning. Their cries are not quiet sobs. They are rhythmic, mournful wails, a kind of haunting song that echoes through the halls of the family home. They chant dirges, ancient songs of sorrow that tell of the life that was lost. In their grief, they might tear at their hair or scratch their cheeks. They may even rip at the fabric of their dark mourning clothes. This is a visceral, powerful expression of loss. It is a sound that everyone in the neighborhood would recognize. It is the sound of a soul being properly sent on its way. The social and legal obligation to perform these rites was absolute. The city of Athens itself considered it a sacred duty to see that a citizen was properly buried. To neglect the dead was to invite divine punishment and to create a dangerous, wandering spirit. The famous play, Antigone, by the great writer Sophocles, revolves entirely around this sacred law. The heroine defies a king and sacrifices her own life simply to ensure her brother receives a proper burial. This shows how deeply this responsibility was woven into the fabric of Greek society. It was a pillar of their world. Before the dawn of the 3rd day, the next stage begins. It is called the ekphora. This is the funeral procession that carries the body from the home to its final resting place. It is done in the darkness of the pre-dawn hours, under the last of the stars. This timing was practical, meant to avoid disrupting the bustling daily life of the city. But it also adds to the solemnity of the occasion. The streets are empty and silent. The procession moves slowly, lit only by the flickering light of torches. The body is carried on its bier, or sometimes in a wooden coffin, lifted by male relatives or close friends. Behind them walk the mourners, the women still chanting their soft dirges, the men silent in their grief. This quiet parade through the sleeping city is the deceased's last journey through the world of the living. They arrive at the cemetery, which was always located outside the city walls. Here, the final act of separation takes place. There were 2 primary methods of interment. The older tradition was inhumation, the simple burial of the body in the earth. A grave would be dug, and the body, or coffin, would be lowered into it. But by the classical period, cremation had become more common, especially after the Bronze Age. For a cremation, a large pyre of wood was built. The body was placed on top, and the fire was lit. The family would watch as the flames consumed the physical form, releasing the last of its earthly ties. They would see the fire rise into the dark sky, a powerful and final farewell. Once the fire had died down, the ashes and bones were carefully collected. They were washed with wine and then placed in a vessel, an urn, which was then buried. Whether buried or cremated, the grave was not forgotten. It was a sacred place, a bridge between the living and the dead. The family would leave offerings. They would pour libations of wine and oil onto the earth. They would leave small cakes and other portions of food. These were not symbolic gestures. They were believed to provide a kind of nourishment for the shade in the afterlife, sustaining it in its new ethereal existence. After the burial is complete and the grave is sealed, the family returns home. The immediate duties to the dead are done. But one last ritual remains, this one for the living. It is called the paradepnit. This is a funeral feast held at the house of the deceased. It serves two purposes. First, it is a final act of honoring the departed. Friends and family gather to share stories and memories, to celebrate the life that was lived. Second, and just as importantly, it serves to cleanse the family of the ritual impurity that came from contact with the dead. It marks the moment of their re-entry into the society of the living. The sounds of the feast, the talking and eating, slowly begin to push back the heavy silence of grief. Life, for those left behind, must go on. With the rites completed, the grave sealed, and the family gathered in remembrance, the soul is finally and truly free. The psyche has been honored. Its passage has been paid for. It has been ritually and lovingly released from its mortal connections. But it is not left to find its own way through the terrifying darkness that awaits. A divine guide is coming. He awaits to lead the soul from the familiar sunlit world into the eternal and waiting gloom. As the last echoes of the funeral feast fade away, the psyche hovers in a state of quiet confusion. The world it knew, the warmth of the sun, the scent of bread, the sounds of the city, are all becoming distant. They are like a dream you can no longer quite remember. It is in this liminal space, this gray and silent moment between two worlds, that a presence makes itself known. There is no grand announcement, no clap of thunder. There is simply a sudden awareness of a figure standing nearby. This is Hermes, the messenger of the gods. But today, he is not carrying messages between mortals or the Olympians. He is here in a far more ancient and solemn role. For this task, he is known by a specific name, a sacred epithet. He is Hermes Psychopompos, the guide of souls. His appearance is not frightening, it is calm and efficient. He wears a traveler's hat, a wide-brimmed pedicos that keeps his divine face cast in shadow. It suggests he is on a journey, a constant traveler between realms. On his feet are his famed talaria, his winged sandals. They do not flap like a bird's wings. Instead, they seem to hold him just a fraction of an inch above the ground, allowing him to glide over the earth without a sound. The faint, almost inaudible whisper of his sandals skimming over the ground is the only sound he makes. In his hand, he carries his most famous attribute, the caduceus. It is a winged staff with two snakes elegantly intertwined around it. This is not the rod of Asclepius, the symbol of medicine. The caduceus is a tool of transition. With it, Hermes can lull the living to sleep, and with it, he can gently guide the spirits of the dead. As he stands in the growing twilight that surrounds the newly departed soul, the staff gives off a faint, otherworldly light. It is a soft, silvery glow, a small beacon in the deepening darkness. Hermes does not speak. There is no need for words. His purpose is clear, and his presence is strangely comforting. He is not a figure of judgment, nor is he an executioner. His role is one of merciful transition. He does not force the souls to follow him. He does not drag them away from the world they love. He simply turns and begins to move, and the psyche understands. It must follow. He is the ferryman's opposite, a gentle shepherd for the lost. The journey begins. It is not an instantaneous teleportation to the land of the dead. It is a true voyage, a long walk over what the poets called the dark paths. As the soul follows Hermes, the world begins to change in a profound way. The vibrant colors of life, the deep blue of the sky, the green of the olive groves, the rich ochre of the earth, all begin to desaturate. The world, slowly but surely, fades into shades of gray. A wind begins to blow, but it is not a normal wind. It is a cold, supernatural breeze that seems to pass right through the soul's incorporeal form. It carries no scent of rain or dust or flowers. It is the sterile, cold breath of the underworld, and it chills the psyche to its very essence. The sounds of life also recede. The distant barking of a dog, the laughter of children, the clatter of a blacksmith's hammer, all of it fades into an unbreakable silence. Soon, the soul realizes it is not alone in following the guide. Other shades begin to appear, joining the silent procession. They are translucent, flickering forms, recently departed, just like you. They drift along, their feet making no sound on the path. You might try to speak to them, to ask a question, to find some comfort in a shared fate, but the attempt is useless. The newly departed soul has no voice. If it tries to speak, it can only produce a strange, high-pitched noise, like the twittering of a bat, a helpless, gibbering sound that conveys its confusion and fear. The air becomes filled with this unsettling chorus, the squeaking and fluttering of countless new souls, all following the silent god. Hermes's neutrality is absolute. He leads all souls with the same calm efficiency. The spirit of a great philosopher follows alongside the spirit of a humble farmer. The shade of a virtuous mother drifts next to the shade of a wicked criminal. In life, their fates were wildly different, but in death, their path and their guide are the same. Hermes is not concerned with their virtue or their wickedness. That is for the judges of the underworld to decide much later. His only task is to ensure the orderly transition from one state of being to the next. The journey continues over bleak, featureless landscapes. The ancient Greeks believed that the entrances to the underworld, the kingdom of Hades, were located at the furthest and most remote edges of the world. Some myths placed them beyond the great river Okeanos, the mythical freshwater ocean that was said to encircle the entire earth. Other, more practical beliefs pointed to real-world locations. They would travel towards a place like the Acarician Peninsula in a region called Epirus, or they would be led to Cape Tanarin in the rugged southern Peloponnese. These were real places, known for their deep caves and mysterious chasms. They were seen as wounds in the earth, places where the veil between the living and the dead was so thin that one could almost pass through. Hermes guides his flock towards one such entrance. The landscape becomes harsher. The gray plains give way to rocky crags and dark, foreboding valleys. The light of the living world is now just a faint memory, a pale glow on the far distant horizon. The only real illumination comes from the soft, constant light of Hermes Caduceus. It guides the way through the oppressive and ever-growing darkness. As Hermes leads the silent procession of shades ever downward into the hidden places of the earth, the air grows colder still. The darkness becomes nearly absolute, and a new sound begins to make itself known. At first, it is just a faint murmur beneath the twittering of the shades, but it grows stronger and more distinct. It is the slow, sloshing sound of a vast, dark body of water, moving sluggishly in the gloom ahead. The journey with the gentle guide is nearing its end. The first great barrier of the underworld is near, and, as the journey continues, the path ends abruptly. Before the procession of souls lies a vast and desolate shore. It is a muddy, gravelly bank, lined with pale, skeletal reeds that whisper and sway in the cold wind. A thick, chilling fog rolls across the landscape, clinging to the ground and shrouding everything in a perpetual, damp gloom. The smell is one of damp earth and slow decay. It is the smell of a riverbank that has never once felt the warmth of the sun. This is the edge of the underworld, and the dark, silent water that flows before you is one of its great rivers. In the earliest texts, it was called the Acheron, the river of pain or woe. But in time, another name became more famous and more feared: the Styx, the river of hate. Its black water moves without a current, a sluggish, oily expanse that seems to absorb all light. The power of the river Styx was legendary. It was so ancient and so potent that even the gods themselves swore their most solemn and unbreakable oaths upon its name. To break such an oath brought a terrible punishment, even for an immortal. The water itself was said to be a deadly poison, capable of corroding any vessel that tried to sail upon it. Only one material, the legend said, could withstand it: a boat made from the hoof of a horse. As your psyche adjusts to the dim light, you become aware of the sheer number of souls gathered here. The shore is not empty. It is crowded with a countless multitude of translucent, shifting figures. They are as numerous as the leaves that fall from the trees in autumn, a silent, rustling carpet of spirits, stretching as far as the eye can see. They press towards the water's edge, a great, cosmic waiting room, filled with an air of absolute despair. The air is filled with the sound of their sorrow. The high-pitched, bodiless whispers of 1,000 souls merge into a constant, desolate moan. They are wailing, not with the loud grief of the living, but with a thin, helpless sorrow. This is the sound of endless, hopeless waiting. And soon, you understand why. Hermes, his duty done, has vanished as silently as he appeared. He has delivered his charges to the riverbank, and has already returned to the world above to collect the next souls. You are now alone, part of this vast, melancholy crowd, and you see that not all of them are allowed to approach the water. A great many of them are held back, pushed away from the shore by some unseen force. These are the atomboi, the unburied. They are the souls of those whose bodies were left to rot on a battlefield or were lost at sea. They are the souls of those whose families neglected their sacred duties and failed to perform the proper funeral rites. They did not receive a burial, and so they cannot cross. Their punishment is to wander these desolate banks for 100 years, a century of aimless, sorrowful waiting in the cold fog before they will finally be permitted to board the ferry. This sight, the miserable suffering of the unburied, is the ultimate proof of how critical the rituals of the living truly were. Your family's grief, their careful washing and anointing, their mournful procession, all of it was for this moment. It was to save you from this terrible fate. You feel the cold coin in your mouth, a heavy weight of privilege. You are one of the lucky ones. You have been properly prepared. And so you are allowed to push through the despairing crowd of the atom boy, making your way to the very edge of the water. The cold that rises from the Black River is profound. It is a bone-chilling cold that sinks deep into your spiritual form. The feeling of despair and endless waiting permeates the very air on this riverbank. It is a heavy blanket of melancholy that smothers all hope. You stand at the water's edge, among the other shades who were properly buried. You wait. The fog is thick, and you can see nothing of the far shore. There is only the black water, the crying of the reeds, and the wailing of the lost souls behind you. Then, through the fog, and across the crowd of despairing shades, a light appears. It is a single, small lantern, its weak yellow glow piercing the gloom. The light bobs and sways, drawing closer. A silhouette begins to take shape behind it. It is a hunched, yet powerful figure, standing in a small boat. The figure is using a long pole to push the craft through the sluggish water towards the shore where you wait. The ferryman has arrived. The silence on the shore deepens. The wailing of the unburied seems to fade into the background, replaced by a tense and foreboding anticipation. The only sound now is the rhythmic, monotonous splash of the ferryman's long pole dipping into the black water. Then comes a new sound, a rough, grating noise, as the hull of the small skiff scrapes against the gravelly shore. He is here. The figure in the boat is Curran. He is a grim and ancient being, the son of Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, and Erebus, the personification of darkness. His very lineage speaks of gloom and shadow. His appearance is just as grim. He is a surly and unkempt old man. His beard is matted and gray. His clothes are filthy rags. But his body is powerful, with thick, corded muscles in his arms and shoulders, earned from an eternity of his labor. But it is his eyes that are most terrifying. In the semi-darkness of the riverbank, they seem to glow with an inner fire. They are blazing, angry eyes that size up each soul with a look of pure contempt. Curran is not a guide. He is not here to offer comfort or assistance. His role is simple, and he performs it with a gruff and impatient air. He is a transporter, nothing more. His rickety skiff, a small, worn barge, is just large enough for a handful of souls. It looks fragile, as if it might sink beneath the weight of its passengers. Charon glares at the crowd of shades pressed against the water's edge. He speaks, his voice a low, gravelly growl. He demands his payment. He wants his fee, the obolos. Without it, there is no passage. He will gruffly deny anyone who cannot pay, pushing them back with his pole to join the miserable, wandering ranks of the unburied. This is the moment of truth. You, a properly prepared soul, feel the presence of the coin. You offer it, a silent, conceptual transaction. Charon accepts it, his fiery eyes lingering on you for a moment before moving to the next soul. He is counting his passengers and his profits. He does not permit the living to cross his path. Great heroes of myth, like Heracles and Orpheus, who journeyed to the underworld while still alive, had to find other ways. They had to use force, or charm, or a special permission from the gods to convince the stubborn ferryman to take them. For you, a shade of the dead, the coin is enough. Charon gestures with his head, a silent command to board. You step into the boat. The feeling is one of absolute finality. It is a tangible sense of a threshold being crossed, from which there is no return. The skiff rocks slightly as other shades join you. You are packed in tightly, still insubstantial, but each of you taking up a conceptual space in the small, cramped vessel. Once the skiff is full, Charon gives a final, powerful shove with his pole, pushing the boat away from the shore. He turns his back on the crowd of shades still waiting and begins the journey across the river. The crossing is marked by an utter and profound silence. The wails from the shore you left behind become distant and then fade away completely. There is no sound now but the gentle, rhythmic splash of Charon's pole dipping into the sluggish, black water. The journey is dark. The fog of the Styx wraps around the boat, obscuring both the shore you left and the one you are heading towards. There is only the small, rickety boat, the silent, hunched form of the ferryman, and the dark, endless water. The trip feels like an eternity. It is a journey of pure transition, suspended between two states of existence. It is a one-way trip. Charon brings souls to the realm of Hades, but he never, ever brings them back. After what seems like a lifetime, you feel another grating scrape. The skiff has touched the far shore. The gloom here is even deeper, the air colder. Charon does not speak. He simply stops poling, his expectation clear. You and the other shades disembark, stepping onto solid, yet utterly alien, ground. You have arrived in the true depths of the underworld. The crossing is complete. As the skiff touches the far shore, the soul steps onto this new, strange earth. The first stage of the journey is over. The world of the living is now just a memory, lost behind a river of hate and a wall of fog. But the true gatekeeper of this realm, a monstrous, three-headed guard, is yet to be faced. What single memory from your life would you hold on to as a source of comfort during that dark, silent crossing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's always so wonderful to read them. Having stepped from Charon's skiff, the soul finds itself in a realm of profound gloom. The air is still and thick with the silence of ages. Before it, the ground stretches out, a gray and featureless landscape under a sky that holds no sun, no moon, and no stars. This is the true beginning of the underworld, and at its entrance stands a great gate. The gate itself is immense, a dark and imposing structure that seems to be forged not from metal or stone, but from pure, unyielding shadow. Some poets claimed it was made of adamant, a substance harder than any diamond, impossible to break. And before this gate lies its eternal guardian. You do not see him at first. You hear him. A low, guttural rumble begins to vibrate through the very ground, a sound so deep it feels less like a noise and more like a tremor in your very essence. The growl comes from three throats at once, a discordant harmony of menace that promises immediate and total violence. Then, through the oppressive darkness, 6 points of light ignite. They are like hot coals, burning with a malevolent, sleepless fire. 6 eyes, tracking your every flicker of movement. pinning you in place with a gaze of pure predatory instinct. This is Cerberus, the Hound of Hell. He is a creature of terrifying lineage, a true monster of the old world. He was born of Typhon, the most monstrous of all titans, and Echidna, the mother of all monsters. His siblings are a gallery of horrors: the Hydra, the Chimera, the Sphinx. Cerberus is a worthy member of this dark and terrible family. His physical form is the stuff of nightmares. He is a colossal dog, vast and powerful. He has 3 heads, each one capable of its own snarl, its own bite. His tail is not a tail at all, but a living, hissing serpent that whips and coils with a mind of its own. And from his back, a mane of writhing snakes grows, each one tasting the dead air with its forked tongue. The origin of his name is a mystery lost to the ancient past. One theory connects it to a very old word, meaning spotted. It is a strangely mundane name for such a spectacular beast. As you stand frozen before him, the foul smell of his breath washes over you. It is the scent of rot and sulfur, the breath of a predator that has spent an eternity at the threshold of death. The continuous, dry hissing of the snakes on his back is a constant, unnerving counterpoint to the deep growl in his chests. To be in his presence is to feel a primal sense of dread. It is a feeling of utter insignificance before a creature of such ancient power. His bark, when he chooses to use it, is a cataclysmic event. The poets said it sounded like thunder or the grinding of bronze plates. It is a sound that could shatter the will of the bravest hero. Yet, for all his terrifying features, Cerberus is not a mindless beast. He is a loyal servant of Hades, the king of this realm. He is an official, a warden, fulfilling his duty with perfect, unwavering efficiency. He has 2 primary functions, which define his existence. His main purpose, his sacred duty, is to prevent the dead from escaping. He is the ultimate jailer. He ensures that every soul who enters the gates of Hades remains here for eternity. To the newly arrived shades, like yourself, he is generally passive. He may watch you with his 6 burning eyes. His 3 noses may test your scent, but he allows you to pass. You are, after all, where you are supposed to be. His fury is reserved for those who try to leave. Any shade that dares to turn back, to make a desperate run for Charon's ferry, will meet a swift and final end, torn apart by his 3 sets of jaws. His secondary function is to deal with the living. He is the ultimate guard dog, meant to devour any living mortal who tries to enter the underworld uninvited. Only a few have ever managed to bypass him. The mighty Heracles, as his final labor, was commanded to capture Cerberus. He did not use stealth. He simply overpowered the beast, wrestling him into submission and dragging him to the surface world before eventually returning him. The great musician Orpheus used a different method. He played his lyre, creating music so beautiful and so sorrowful that it lulled the monstrous guardian and all his snakes into a deep and peaceful sleep. Others used trickery. The prophetess, known as the Sibyl, who guided the hero Aeneas, pacified Cerberus by throwing him a honey cake laced with powerful drugs. But you are not a hero. You are not a living mortal. You are a simple shade, arriving as scheduled. Cerberus recognizes this. With a final, ground-shaking snort from his 3 great heads, he allows you to pass through the gates of adamant. Stepping past him is to accept the finality of death. There is no trickery, no music, no brute force, that will ever allow you to pass him again in the other direction. Once you are past the watchful eyes of Cerberus, you are truly and irrevocably within the realm of Hades. The path now leads onward, toward a great open space where the fate of every single arrival is to be decided. The path beyond the gates opens onto a landscape of immense and desolate scale. You find yourself on a vast, pale, and utterly featureless plain. It stretches out in every direction, a great gray emptiness under the same starless, sunless sky. The ground is not soil or grass, but a kind of pale, packed dust that rises in silent puffs around your ethereal feet. 3 paths can be seen, diverging from a central point far in the distance. One path leads into a deeper, more profound darkness, radiating a palpable sense of dread. Another seems to glow with a soft, gentle light, a promise of peace. The third, the one in the middle, is as gray and indistinct as the plain itself. This is the crossroads of fate. This great, empty space is the plane of judgment, an idea most famously described by the philosopher Plato. It is here that the next stage of your journey will take place. An even greater sense of quiet falls here. Even the rustling of other shades seems to have ceased. A profound and heavy silence hangs over the plain. It is not the absence of sound. It is an active and oppressive stillness. It is a silence that encourages introspection, that forces you to turn your thoughts inward. As you join the other souls, you realize you are now part of a line, a slow, silent, and seemingly endless procession of shades is shuffling forward. And as you take your place, you become aware of a strange and deeply unsettling sensation. You feel utterly exposed, as if every piece of your earthly identity has been stripped away. Your wealth, your social status, your family name, your physical appearance, none of it matters here. The soul of a king shuffles in line right next to the soul of a beggar, and in this place they are indistinguishable. Only the soul's true nature, its essential character, remains. This concept of a final judgment evolved over time in Greek thought. In the earliest stories, like those of Homer, the afterlife was a dreary, shadowy place for nearly everyone, regardless of their deeds. But later, philosophers and religious thinkers developed a more refined idea. They believed that a life of virtue should be rewarded, and a life of wickedness must be punished. This plane is the mechanism for that cosmic justice. Here, in this place of absolute truth, no deceit is possible. You cannot lie about your deeds. You cannot offer excuses. The philosophers believed that your life's actions left marks upon your soul. A life of kindness and honesty would leave the soul clean and bright, but a life of cruelty, perjury, and injustice would leave it covered in ugly wounds and deep, festering scars. These scars of the soul were plain for all to see. They were a perfect, unalterable record of your moral life, and the judges who waited ahead could read them like a book. You have no advocate here. There is no one to speak on your behalf, no lawyer to argue your case. You and the state of your soul are the only evidence that will be presented. The atmosphere is crushingly solemn. As you shuffle forward, you are confronted with the totality of your own life. Every choice, every action, every secret thought rises to the surface of your consciousness. There is nowhere to hide from your own past. In the far distance, at the very point where the 3 paths diverge, you can see the focal point of the entire plane. 3 imposing thrones sit upon a low, wide dais. They are simple and unadorned, carved from a dark, gray stone. Upon them sit 3 figures. Even from this distance, they radiate an aura of immense and ancient power. They are the arbiters of the dead, the judges of the underworld. The slow, inexorable shuffling of the line of souls all moves towards them. Your turn is coming. As the soul shuffles forward in the silent line, the figures on the 3 stone thrones become clearer. They are not gods, born of primordial chaos. They are not demons, forged in the darkness. They are men, or rather, they were once men. They are 3 mortal kings who were so renowned for their incredible justice in life that they were granted the sacred and terrible duty of upholding it for all eternity. They sit with an immovable stillness, their ancient faces showing no emotion, not anger, not pity, only a deep and unwavering concentration as they preside over the endless stream of new arrivals. These are the 3 judges of the underworld: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iolcus. The first judge, who often presides over the initial examination, is Rhadamanthus. Like his more famous brother, Minos, he was a son of the great god Zeus and the mortal woman Europa. In his mortal life, he was a king, known for creating a code of laws for the island of Crete, so perfect and so fair that it was adopted by other Greek cities. His justice was said to be inflexible, but always correct. Now, in the afterlife, he has been given a specific jurisdiction. He is tasked with judging the souls of those who come from Asia. His voice, when he questions a soul, is deep and resonant, a calm and steady sound in the profound silence of the plain. The second judge is Iolcus. He too was a son of Zeus, his mother the nymph Aegina. He was the king of the island that bore his mother's name, Aegina. He was not known for his laws, but for his incredible piety and his deep connection to the gods. When a terrible plague struck his lands, he prayed with such sincerity to his father Zeus that the god answered and ended the pestilence. His reputation for piety and fairness was so great that he was often called upon to settle disputes among other men and even among the gods themselves. In the underworld, his duty is to judge the souls of those from Europe. He represents the balance of piety, a reminder that one's relationship with the gods is a key measure of a mortal life. The third judge, seated in the central throne, is the most famous of the 3. He is Minos, the legendary king of Crete. His wisdom in life was so profound that he was said to commune directly with Zeus. He was a great lawgiver, a powerful king who brought order and prosperity to his people. Here, in the land of the dead, his authority is greatest. While Rhadamanthus and Iolcus may question and evaluate the souls from their respective lands, Minos holds the final vote. On difficult or ambiguous cases, his is the deciding say. He is often depicted holding a royal scepter, a symbol of his ultimate authority, even in this shadowy realm. His gaze is the most piercing of all. It seems to see into the deepest, most secret corners of a soul, uncovering every truth that it has ever held. Their mortal origins are the very key to their purpose. Because they were once men, they understand human frailty. They know the sting of temptation, the heat of anger, the bitterness of envy. They are not abstract gods judging from on high. They are kings who have lived among mortals, and therefore their judgment is seen as more meaningful and more legitimate. They were not born to this role. They were appointed to it by the gods, as a reward for the justice and wisdom they displayed in their lives. The great philosopher Plato even suggested that a truly just man should not fear death, but should instead look forward to the chance to speak with such great and honorable figures. Together, they form a perfect tribunal. Rhadamanthus represents the strict and unbending letter of the law. Iolcus represents piety and the spirit of the law. And Minos represents the ultimate authority and wisdom to make the final, difficult choice. Their judgment is absolute. It is final. It cannot be appealed. They are the ultimate backstop of cosmic justice. The long, slow shuffle in the line has brought you forward. The figures on the thrones are no longer distant. They are right before you. The introduction to the judges is now complete. The moment of truth has finally arrived. The soul we have followed steps forward from the line. It stands alone on the dusty plain before the tribunal, ready for its life to be weighed in the balance. The moment you step before the thrones, your entire existence is laid bare. It is as if your whole life, from your first breath to your last, flashes before your mind's eye. Every memory is perfectly vivid and crystal clear. Every word you ever spoke, every deed you ever performed, both noble and shameful, it all rushes through your consciousness, not as a memory, but as a present reality. There are no secrets here. The judgment process in the Greek underworld was not about faith in the way we might understand it now. It was about actions. It was about justice towards your fellow men, and piety, a concept called eusebia, towards the gods. The judges are not interested in what you believed. They are interested in what you did, and the primary evidence is the soul itself. As Plato described it, the soul carries the marks of its life. The soul of a tyrant, for example, would be presented to the judges full of scars. Each act of perjury, each crime, each act of cruelty would have left a visible wound, a festering mark upon his spiritual form. Conversely, a soul that lived a just and virtuous life would appear clean, smooth, and unblemished. The first thing the judges do is simply examine you. They look for these marks, the chilling sensation of the scars on your soul being seen, being read, and being understood is the heart of the judgment. There was no concept of original sin. You were not born flawed. Your soul was judged solely on its own merits, on the choices you made during your time in the sunlit world. The criteria were clear and known to all Greeks. There were three main categories of behavior that were of paramount importance. First, your treatment of the gods. Did you honor them with proper sacrifices? Did you respect their temples and their priests? Second, your treatment of your parents and of guests. Family loyalty and hospitality were sacred duties. To mistreat a parent or to harm a guest under your roof was a grave offense. Third, and perhaps most important, was your adherence to oaths. An oath, sworn by the gods, was an unbreakable bond. To break one was to scar your soul in a way that the judges would surely see. This was the ultimate equalizer in Greek society. On the plane of judgment, a powerful king's soul, if it was scarred by tyranny and broken oaths, was judged more harshly than a humble slave's soul. If it was clean and unmarked by injustice, all the wealth and power of the world could not erase a single scar. For most people, however, the verdict was not so extreme. The vast majority of human lives were a mixture of good and bad. Most souls were neither pure enough for the blissful Elysian fields, nor wicked enough for the torment of Tartarus. Some were believed to receive preferential treatment. Great heroes, the demigod children of the gods, were often sent directly to Elysium. So too were those who had been initiated into the secretive Eleusinian mysteries, a popular religious cult that promised its followers a happier afterlife. But for everyone else, the judgment was based purely on the evidence inscribed upon their soul. After their examination, the judges confer their ancient voices, a low murmur. The verdict is reached. It is delivered without any ceremony or fanfare. There is no grand pronouncement. One of the judges, perhaps Minos himself, simply raises a hand. He points. He indicates which of the three paths ahead the soul must now take. That simple word, or that single gesture, seals an eternal fate. Before you, the three paths diverge. One is dark and forbidding, a steep downward slope into blackness. One is pale and gray, stretching out into the familiar, featureless gloom of the plain. And one seems to be bathed in a soft, welcoming light. There is a final, quiet moment of acceptance. The judgment is passed. The path is chosen. For the soul we have followed, its life a typical mixture of small kindnesses and minor failings. Its destiny lies down the middle path. This is the most common fate for mortals. The journey now continues, away from the court of judgment and into the vast, silent plains of the dead. If you had to stand before these three judges, what single act from your life would you be most proud to share? It's inspiring to read the moments others hold close, so if you'd like to join in, I'd be glad to hear yours too. In the highest room of the North Tower, a single candle burns. Here, in the quiet solitude of the scriptorium, you have finally returned. This room is a sanctuary of thought, a small island of literacy in a sea of superstition. The castle moans and groans around you, its usual chorus of night sounds. But tonight, you hear them differently. You hear them not as the voices of ghosts, but as the clues to a deeper truth. Before you, a heavy, leather-bound journal lies open. This is your chronicle, the place where the story of this stone fortress is recorded. Your tools are simple, yet precious. A goose feather quill, its tip expertly sharpened. A small pot of iron gall ink, a dark and permanent liquid that smells faintly of metal and acid. And the page itself, a smooth sheet of vellum, made from the finest calfskin. It is a luxury, afforded only to your station. As a scribe, your role is to record the history of this place, the deeds of your patron, the lineage of his house. But you have taken on a second, secret task: to understand the castle itself, to solve the mystery of its ghosts. The soft, steady light from your single beeswax candle, another great luxury, casts a warm glow on the page. In the margins of your chronicle, alongside the carefully written histories, are your own sketches. Here is a diagram of an arrow slit, narrow and long. Next to it, a cross-section of the great spiral staircase. You dip your quill into the ink, and the only sound in the room is the gentle, rhythmic scratching as your hand begins to move across the rough surface of the page. You are piecing the great puzzle together. You begin with the most common tale, the story of the mournful lady. For generations, the inhabitants have spoken of a mournful wail, heard on the coldest nights, echoing from the west battlements. They say it is the ghost of a noblewoman, a white lady, betrayed by her lover. A classic and tragic ghost trope, one you have heard in many forms, but your observations have led you to a different conclusion. You write of the specific arrow slit you sketched, the one whose outer edge has been chipped by some long ago siege. When the north wind blows at a precise angle, it passes over this imperfection. It creates a low, flute-like note, a sound that is undeniably sorrowful. You theorize that this sound in the dead of night is heard by a lonely servant or a frightened guard. Their mind, already primed by superstition, seeks an explanation. It finds one in the familiar stories. The wind's sad song is anthropomorphized. It becomes the cry of a woman. The story is told, whispered in the kitchens and the barracks. The power of suggestion takes hold. Soon, everyone who hears that sound no longer hears the wind. They hear the mournful lady. It is a ghost born of stone and air. Next, you address the phantom guard. The tale tells of heavy, rhythmic footsteps climbing the main tower stairs late at night. Yet no one is ever there. Your mind goes back to your study of the spiral staircase. You recall its clever design, the wedge-shaped stones, the central pillar. You write about its unique acoustic properties, the sounds from the very bottom of the stairwell, where guards might shift their weight on a cold night, do not travel straight up. They bounce and echo, the stone carrying the vibration, distorting it. The sound arrives at the top, delayed and amplified, sounding much closer than it is. It sounds like someone walking just around the bend. And what of the infamous cold spots? Those sudden pockets of unnatural chill that are said to mark the presence of a spirit. You dip your quill again and write of drafts. You describe the poorly sealed window frames packed with moss that has dried and shrunk. You explain the simple science of the stones themselves. The massive walls of the castle absorb the day's warmth very slowly, and they lose it just as slowly through the night. A person standing near these immense stones will feel the cold radiating from them, a stark contrast to the air warmed by a distant fireplace. Not a ghost, just a temperature differential. You pause, looking at your work. The page is filling with your neat, careful script. You are a chronicler, a recorder of history, and you know that history is often a blend of fact and myth, shaped by the biases of the writer. But here, in your private investigation, you are seeking a purer truth. You are in a unique position. As a literate and analytical observer, you have the privilege of distance. You are not a soldier, terrified of the dark. You are not a servant, exhausted from a day of labor. You have the time and the training to see the pattern that everyone else has missed. The inhabitants are not lying. They are experiencing these things. They truly hear the wails and the footsteps, but they fall victim to a simple trick of the mind, confirmation bias. They already believe the castle is haunted, so every ambiguous stimulus, every strange sound, every flicker of light is interpreted as proof of that belief. Your theory is forming on the page, clear and logical. But you know the architecture is only one part of the equation. You must now consider the final and most crucial ingredients, isolation and the human mind itself. You lift your quill from the page and gaze out the narrow window of your chamber. Snow has begun to fall, thick, silent flakes that are already piling up against the stone. The world outside is being muffled, buried under a blanket of white. The castle is becoming a world unto itself. You turn your thoughts to the people who live within these walls. You begin to understand that the stone and the wind are merely the instruments. The minds of the inhabitants are the orchestra. You reflect on the tyranny of isolation. The long, dark winter nights seem to stretch into an eternity. With the sun setting so early and rising so late, the people are confined indoors for most of the day. The castle, which feels like a bastion of safety in the summer, becomes a cold stone prison in the winter. The cold is relentless. It is a deep, bone-aching chill that even a roaring fire in the great hall can never fully banish. Dwindling supplies mean the diet becomes monotonous. The taste of salted meat and coarse, heavy bread, day after day, affects the mood and perhaps even the perception. You even make a note of the rye and the possibility of ergot contamination, a mold that can cause terrible hallucinations. Life is governed by a rigid social structure. The lord and his family live in relative comfort, while the servants and soldiers endure hardship. But even the lord is not immune to a kind of social isolation. He is separated by his rank. The noblewomen are perhaps the most isolated of all. They are often confined to their chambers, the solar, for long periods, with little to do but needlework and prayer. Everyone is trapped in their designated role, and while true privacy is almost impossible to find, with people always coming and going, one can feel incredibly lonely in the vast, echoing spaces of the castle. Then there is the garrison mentality. Even in times of peace, the castle is a fortress. There is a constant, low-level stress, a paranoia that comes from living behind walls. Every guard is vigilant, always watching for an attack that may never come. This perpetual state of alert sharpens the senses, but also makes them prone to error. Boredom is a constant enemy. The days are filled with repetitive tasks. Entertainment is simple. Storytelling, a musician's song, a game of chess. Ghost stories are a favorite pastime. They are a thrilling way to break the monotony. In this pre-scientific world, superstition is the default explanation for anything that is not understood. The world is seen as a place filled with invisible forces. A deep and abiding belief in God, the devil, angels, and demons is universal. It is not a question of faith. It is a statement of fact. So when a strange event occurs, it is only natural to attribute it to a supernatural cause. The castle becomes a total institution, a closed world, cut off from the outside, with its own rules, its own stories, and its own fears. These internal psychological pressures build and build. They create a fertile ground where the seeds of fear and imagination can flourish. The strange sounds created by the architecture are amplified 1,000 times by the minds that are forced to listen to them night after night. You understand now with a profound sense of empathy. The ghosts are not an invention. They are a necessity. They are the names given to the anxieties of a lonely, cold, and frightened community trapped together in the dark. You have the architecture. You have the psychological conditions. All that remains now is to write the final entry in your chronicle, the part that explains the very nature of perception. You will conclude your investigation and seal the true story of this place forever in your book. You take a moment, closing your eyes. You let the sounds of the castle wash over you once more. The distant howl of the wind, the creak of a heavy wooden door, the scuttling of a mouse behind the wall. Your brain, you realize, is a prediction machine. It is constantly seeking patterns in the chaos, trying to match the sounds you hear to a catalog of things it already knows. When the sound is ambiguous, the brain does not like uncertainty. It fills in the blanks with what it expects to hear. In this castle, it expects to hear ghosts. This is the intellectual core of your conclusion, the master key that unlocks the entire mystery. You begin to write about the tricks of the senses, the beautiful and predictable flaws in human perception. You start with the ears. You give a name to the phenomenon you have observed. Auditory pareidolia, the tendency of the human brain to perceive meaningful sounds, like voices or footsteps, in random, meaningless noise, like the howling of the wind or the creaking of wood. The castle, with its endless symphony of strange acoustics, is a perfect instrument for producing this effect. Then, you consider the eyes. You write of visual pareidolia, the same principle applied to sight. Seeing a face in the grain of a wooden door, or a menacing figure in the shifting patterns of plaster stains on a damp wall. In the low, flickering light of torches and candles, shadows dance and merge. The brain, desperate for meaning, assembles these random shapes into a familiar form. A human figure, a white lady. You reflect on the nature of low light. You have noticed how, at dusk, the world seems to bleed its color, becoming a landscape of blues and grays. You don't know the name for it, but you describe what you see. How shadows seem deeper, more menacing, in the twilight. You are observing what future scholars will call the Purkinje effect. You also make a note of the deception of peripheral vision. You have experienced it yourself. The feeling of seeing something move just at the edge of your sight, only for it to vanish when you turn to look directly at it. Your periphery is excellent at detecting motion, but terrible with detail. In a place of flitting shadows, it is constantly being fooled. You consider the state between waking and sleeping, that strange, drifting moment when the mind is untethered. You write of the vivid images and sounds that can appear in this state. Waking from a doze in a cold, uncomfortable chair, a guard might truly see a figure or hear a voice for a fleeting second, an experience as real as any other that he would later recall as a ghostly encounter. It is what will one day be called a hypnagogic hallucination. The ancient idea of the four humors taught that an imbalance of fluids in the body could affect the mind. Too much black bile, and a man would become melancholic, prone to dark visions. This was their way of understanding what you are now defining in new terms. The mind is not a perfect mirror of the world. It is an active interpreter, a storyteller, and the castle itself, with its towering walls and its dark, narrow corridors, is a piece of emotional architecture. It is designed to make you feel small, to make you feel unsafe. It is a landscape built to encourage these very tricks of the mind. The old tales speak of a genius, loci, a spirit of a place. You are now redefining that term. The spirit of this castle is not a restless soul. It is the wind in its arrow slits, the echo in its stairs, the chill of its stone, and the shadows in its corners. The final, elegant conclusion clicks into place in your mind, a feeling of pure mental clarity. The castle is not a stage where ghosts perform. The castle is the ghost itself. The theory is complete. It is robust and it is elegant. The final step is to commit it to history, writing the closing words of your investigation. You pick up the quill for the last time tonight. The vellum on the final page of your special report lies smooth and waiting. The castle is quiet now, its voices understood. You feel a deep and peaceful satisfaction, the quiet triumph of having solved the puzzle, of having restored a sense of order to the world. You dip your quill for the final sentence of this long investigation. You are a scribe. You have an unspoken duty to record the truth as you have seen it. The purpose of a chronicle like this is to preserve knowledge for the future. You know that these stone walls will outlast everyone currently living within them. The castle's architectural voice will continue to speak to future generations. And you wonder if your rational explanation will survive, or if it will be lost, while the simpler, more exciting stories of phantom guards and ladies in white will be the ones that are told and retold and believed. But that is not your concern. Your duty is to the record. You write of the master masons, the anonymous, long-dead geniuses who, perhaps unintentionally, built this magnificent psychological landscape. In a final, subtle irony, you note that in explaining the haunting, you have documented the castle's true soul more intimately than anyone who has ever lived here. You write your final lines, a summary of your journey, a testament to the power of reason and quiet observation. You watch the dark ink sink into the page, a permanent mark of understanding. And so, with a final grain of sand to dry the ink, you close the chronicle. The mystery is solved. The castle's ghosts have been given their true names. They are the echo in the stairwell, the wind in the loophole, the shadow in the hall. They are not spirits of the dead, but the very soul of the stone, speaking a language of architecture to anyone quiet enough to listen. You have done your duty. The truth is now recorded, safe within the pages of your book. Thank you for joining me on this investigation. I hope it has been a fascinating journey for you. Now, the main story is at its end, but our time together is not. Let the deeper quiet begin as we drift into the castle's later years. Rest easy. The judgment has been passed. The path has been chosen. Our soul has begun its slow, shuffling journey into the pale expanse of the Asphodel meadows. And now, with the narrative of that single soul complete, our perspective can widen. Let us pull back from the individual to the landscape and allow our attention to drift. Let us become explorers of this deep and silent geography. The underworld is a realm defined by its water. Its borders, its regions, and its very character are shaped by 5 great and ancient rivers. Let us begin our final, gentle exploration here, on the banks of the most famous of them all. Imagine a river that flows with a silence so profound it seems to absorb all sound. Its water is the color of polished obsidian, an inky, starless black that does not reflect the gloom of the underworld, but deepens it. There is no current, no ripple, no white water. It simply moves, a vast and unstoppable presence. To stand near it is to feel an aura of immense and ancient power, a power not of violence, but of binding authority. This is the river Styx. Its name, in the mortal tongue, translates to hate or abhorrence, a name that speaks to its fearsome reputation. But its true nature is far more complex than simple malice. To understand the Styx, you must understand that it was not always just a river. In the age before the Olympian gods, in the time of the great and powerful Titans, Styx was a goddess. She was one of the Oceanids, a daughter of the primordial Titans of the sea, Oceanus and Tethys. She was a spirit of the water, ancient and respected. When the Great War, the Titanomachy, broke out between the old gods and the young Zeus with his siblings, Styx made a fateful choice. Following the advice of her father, she became the very first of the ancient deities to pledge her allegiance to Zeus. She brought her children to fight alongside him. siding with the new order against her own kind. When the war was finally won, and the Titans were cast down into the pit of Tartarus, Zeus did not forget his first and most important ally. To honor her loyalty, he bestowed upon her the greatest honor he could conceive. He decreed that her name and her very essence would become the agent of the most sacred and unbreakable vow. The spirit of the goddess Styx would forever be embodied in the dark river that bears her name. She would become the eternal promise of the gods, and so the river became the ultimate seal of truth. From that moment on, whenever a god needed to swear their most solemn and binding oath, they would invoke her name. The ritual was one of deep gravity. The rainbow goddess, she would travel down from the sunlit peaks of the god's home to the gloomy depths of the underworld. In her hands, she would carry a jug forged of pure, shining gold. She would dip this golden vessel into the silent, black water of the Styx, collecting a measure of its divine essence. She would then carry this sacred water back to the council of the gods. The god who was to swear the oath would then pour the water out as a libation, speaking their promise aloud. To swear upon the water of Styx was to make a promise that was woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. To break such an oath was unthinkable. But if a god were ever to lie, or to go back on their word, the punishment was the most terrible that an immortal could ever face. It was a punishment devised by Zeus himself to ensure that the honor of his first ally would never be taken lightly. The perjured god would be forced to drink the water of the Styx. At once, the divine being would fall into a death-like state. They would lose their voice, their breath, and all consciousness. They would lie in a deep and unshakable coma for the duration of what the myths call a great year. This was not a mortal year of 12 months. A great year, in the cosmic sense, was thought to be nearly a decade of human time. For 10 long years, the god would lie still and silent, trapped in a void between life and death. And the punishment did not end there. Upon finally awakening from their long slumber, the god would find themselves in exile. For 9 more great years, a period of nearly a century, they would be banished from the company of their fellow gods. They could not attend their councils. They could not feast on their nectar and ambrosia. They were shunned and isolated, a stain upon the divine family. This was the price of a broken promise. This was the power that flowed in the silent, black water. The river itself was said to meander through the underworld, its course so long and winding that it circled the entire realm 9 times. Its dark waters were considered to be more than just poisonous. They were thought to be an agent of dissolution, so potent that they could corrode and destroy any mortal vessel that dared to sail upon them. Only the ferry of Charon, perhaps protected by some divine charm, could withstand its touch. And yet, in one of the most famous stories of all, this destructive power was used for protection. The great hero Achilles was the son of the sea nymph Thetis. Knowing that her mortal son was destined for a short and glorious life, Thetis sought to defy fate. She took him as an infant to the underworld, and holding him by his tiny heel, she dipped his entire body into the sacred black water of the Styx. The river's power seeped into his skin, making him invulnerable. No sword or spear could pierce his flesh. But the small spot on his heel, the place where his mother's loving hand had held him, remained untouched by the water. It remained mortal. It remained his only weakness. The Styx gave him the gift of a god. From this river of binding promises, a place of divine law and solemn power, we can now allow our focus to drift. We move to its frequent companion in myth, a river whose name speaks not of power, but of the deeply human, emotional journey of the dead. We leave behind the stark, black silence of the Styx and find ourselves on the banks of another, very different river. The light here is gray and diffuse. The sky above is the color of slate, and it is reflected perfectly in the vast, slow-moving water below. The river is wide, and its surface is sluggish, like a great pool of liquid sorrow. This is the Acheron, the river of endless woe, or the river of pain. If the Styx is the legal boundary of the underworld, the Acheron is its emotional threshold. It represents the profound and inescapable sadness of leaving the sunlit world of the living behind forever. In the very earliest myths, those sung by the poet Homer, it was the Acheron, not the Styx, that was the primary river of the dead. It was across these gray waters that the grim ferryman, Taran, poled his rickety barge, heavy with its cargo of new souls. Sometimes it was not even depicted as a flowing river, but as a vast, swampy lake, a place of stagnation and melancholy. Its shores are lined with pale, ghostly trees, perhaps aspens or willows, their thin branches drooping down as if in mourning, constantly trailing in the brackish, joyless water. From the mists that rise from the river's surface, one can sometimes hear a faint, distant sound. It is a sound of moaning, the collective, whispered grief of countless souls carried on the damp, cold air. The god of the river, who was also named Acheron, was said to have been a son of the sun god, Helios. During the Great War between the gods and the Titans, Acheron took pity on the thirsty Titans and gave them water to drink. For this act of compassion towards the enemies of Zeus, he was punished. He was transformed into the mournful river that now bears his name and was banished to the eternal gloom of the underworld. His very nature is one of sadness, born from a single, punished act of kindness. The philosopher Plato, in his later writings, imagined a more complex role for this sorrowful river. He described it as the destination for the souls of most average people, those who had lived lives that were neither exceptionally good nor irredeemably evil. These souls, after their judgment, were carried along the slow, gray currents of the Acheron. It was not a journey to a final resting place. It was a journey of penance and of seeking forgiveness. Plato's vision was that these souls would be washed along the river until they reached a specific point. From this place, they could look out and see the souls of those they had wronged in their mortal lives. The soul of a man who had committed a murder, for instance, would be carried to a place where he could see and call out to the soul of his victim. The soul would then have to plead, to beg for forgiveness for the harm it had caused. This process would repeat for every wrong they had committed. If the victim was moved to grant forgiveness, the penitent soul would be released. It would be allowed to leave the sorrowful river and enter the placid waters of the Acheron lake, a place of quiet rest. But if the victim refused to grant forgiveness, the soul would be swept away again by the gray currents. It would be carried on down a terrible path that led, eventually, into the dark abyss of Tartarus itself, only to be brought back a year later to plead its case once more. This cycle of sorrow and begging for mercy could continue for ages. It was a powerful image of restorative justice, played out on the banks of a river of woe. And this river of myth has a connection to the real world. In the rugged, mountainous region of northwestern Greece, called Epirus, there is a real river that is also named Acheron. For much of its course, it flows through steep gorges, and at several points, it disappears entirely, flowing underground for some distance before re-emerging. The ancient Greeks, seeing this mysterious behavior, believed that this was one of the world's true gateways to the underworld. They saw the river dive into the earth and imagined it was flowing directly into the kingdom of Hades. It became a famous site of pilgrimage, home to an oracle of the dead, where mortals could come to try and communicate with the spirits of their departed loved ones. In the great Roman epic, the Aeneid, the poet Virgil returns the ferryman to this river. It is across the vast, mournful Acheron that his hero Aeneas must cross to enter the land of the dead. It is here that he sees the shores crowded with the unburied, and it is here that he feels the profound sadness of the underworld for the first time. The Acheron is the great sigh of the afterlife. It is the river of grief, of longing, and of the long, slow work of coming to terms with the pains of the past. From the pervasive sorrow of the Acheron, let us now move to a river that offers a strange and gentle kind of mercy, a mercy found in the complete erasure of memory. Our journey now takes us to a quiet and desolate place. We are standing on the plain of Lethe, a barren landscape where no trees or plants grow. It is a place of profound and dreamlike stillness, and flowing silently through this plain is the river that gives it its name, the river Lethe. The water here is perfectly clear, and so placid and slow-moving that it appears to be utterly still. It makes almost no sound, just the softest, most gentle lapping against a silent, dusty shore. Its name, Lethe, means forgetfulness or oblivion, and that is the gift or the curse that its waters bestow. The river was said to flow through the dark, silent caves of Hypnos, the personification of sleep. This gives the place its deeply soporific and peaceful atmosphere. Lethe was not just the name of the river. It was also the name of a goddess, a spirit who personified this state of blissful ignorance. In the most common vision of the underworld, the shades of the dead who reside in the Asphodel meadows, the vast gray realm of the average soul, would drink from this river. They would cup the clear, cool water in their ghostly hands, and upon drinking it, they would forget. They would forget the pains of their mortal life. They would forget the joys. They would forget their ambitions, their loves, their hatreds, and their fears. They would be washed clean of their own identities, becoming witless, flittering shades with no memory of who they once were. This was a sad fate, to be sure, but it was also a merciful one. It was a release from the burdens of a life that was now over. But in later traditions, particularly in the philosophies of Plato and in the epic poetry of Virgil, the river Lethe took on a new and even more profound role. It became a crucial part of the cycle of reincarnation. In this vision, the most virtuous souls, after spending 1,000 years in the blissful paradise of Elysium, might be destined to return to the world of the living, to be reborn into a new body, to live a new life. But before they could return, they had to be cleansed of their past. These souls would be led to the silent banks of the Lethe. Here, they would be required to drink deeply from its clear waters. The water would wash away all memory of their previous life. It would also erase their knowledge of the afterlife, of the time they had spent in Elysium, and of the very structure of the cosmos. They had to return to the mortal world as a blank slate, with no memory of what had come before. This was necessary so that their new life could be lived authentically, without the unfair advantage of divine knowledge. This idea is central to one of Plato's most famous works, the myth of Ua. In this story, a soldier named Ua dies in battle and gets to witness the inner workings of the afterlife before being resurrected. He watches as the souls who are destined for rebirth are gathered on the plain of Lethe. Before they drink, they are allowed to choose their next life. They are shown countless possible destinies: the life of a king, a tyrant, a philosopher, an animal. The choice is theirs. Some choose wisely, others foolishly. But once the choice is made, it is sealed. And then they must drink. Plato describes how the souls, thirsty after their long journey, rush to the water's edge. They drink greedily, and as they do, they become drowsy and fall into a deep sleep. As they sleep, they are lifted up and sent back to the world above, like shooting stars in the night, to be born into their newly chosen lives. The Lethe is the river of the fresh start. It represents the peace that can only come from truly letting go of the past. It is a final, gentle release from the weight of memory. It is the quiet promise that every end can also be a new beginning. While some rivers of the underworld bring peace and forgetting, others are born of the realm's harshest and most terrifying realities. Our final exploration takes us to the very edge of Tartarus, the deep pit of punishment for the wicked. Here, two rivers flow, forming the geographical and symbolic barriers of this terrible place. They are the sensory landscape of divine punishment. One is a river of fire, the other a river of tears. First, we behold the Phlegethon. Its name means flaming, and it is a river made of pure liquid fire. But this is not the fire of the mortal world. It flows with a mesmerizing, silent energy. There is no smoke. There is no sound of crackling or burning. It is a torrent of bright, flickering light that illuminates the black, adamantine walls of Tartarus. The fire does not consume its own banks. It is a supernatural fire that exists only to punish and to contain. It was said to coil around the great bronze walls of Tartarus, acting as a fiery moat, one of its primary defenses, ensuring that none of the damned souls within could ever escape. Plato, in his detailed geography of the underworld, suggested a specific purpose for this river. He believed it was the place where those who had committed the most awful crimes against their own families were punished. The souls of parricides and matricides, those who had murdered their own parents, were thrown into the Phlegethon. They were swept along in its fiery current, their incorporeal forms tormented by the ghostly flames, until they were carried to the Agirician lake, where they had to beg their victims for forgiveness. If they were not forgiven, they were swept back into the river of fire to endure the cycle of torment once more. And flowing nearby, a stark and chilling contrast to the silent fire, is the second river, the Cocytus. Its name means wailing, and it is the river of pure lamentation. This river is not made of water, but of the collected and endless tears of the damned souls in Tartarus. It is a river of pure, crystallized sorrow. Its banks are not of mud or stone, but of sharp, jagged ice. The landscape here is one of utter desolation, frozen and barren. A bone-chilling cold emanates from the river, a cold that seems to leach all warmth from the spirit. And from the river itself comes the sound that gives it its name, a constant, heartbreaking, and distant sound of endless weeping. It is the chorus of all the unburied and all the punished, a river that sings a song of eternal grief. The Cocytus, was a tributary of the Acheron, its icy, sorrowful waters flowing into the greater river of woe, adding to its misery. Plato assigned murderers to be punished here, thrown into its icy depths, to be carried along by the current of lament, suffering the same cycle of pleading for forgiveness as the souls in the Phlegethon. Together, these two rivers define the experience of Tartarus, the terrifying, silent sight of the ever-flowing fire, and the heartbreaking, endless sound of the frozen river of wailing. The rivers of the underworld flow on, each a current of myth and meaning, defining the very landscape of the afterlife. Let these ancient waters of hate and sorrow, of fire and forgetting, gently carry you now, deeper into the quiet country of your dreams. The 5 great rivers have been explored. The geography of the underworld has been mapped in myth and in dream. And now, as our journey nears its final, quiet end, we can drift into the more esoteric corners of this ancient world. Let us leave the mainstream beliefs behind, like a traveler departing a well-worn road, to wander down the secluded, overgrown paths of forgotten lore. Here, in the bonus chapters of our exploration, we find alternative visions of the afterlife. We find whispers of secret knowledge, philosophical dreams of rebirth, and the ancient human desire to speak with the dead just one more time. Our pace is now exceptionally slow. There is no destination. There is only the gentle act of contemplation. We begin with a set of beliefs that offered a radical and deeply hopeful alternative to the grim finality of the standard underworld. This was the faith of Orphism. It was a minority view, a mystery cult whose teachings were whispered, not proclaimed. It was a path for those who sought not just to endure the afterlife, but to conquer it. This faith was founded on the story of its great prophet, Orpheus. He was the legendary poet, the master musician, who had traveled to the very depths of Hades in a futile attempt to rescue his beloved wife, Eurydice, and he had returned. He had seen the land of the dead and had walked back into the light of the living. This experience, this round trip between two worlds, made him the perfect source of secret knowledge. The core of the Orphic belief system was a reinterpretation of the myth of the god Dionysus. In the common myths, Dionysus was the vibrant, chaotic god of wine and ecstasy. But in the Orphic tradition, his story was a cosmic tragedy. They believed that Dionysus, as a beloved infant son of Zeus, was targeted by the jealous Titans, the old gods who had been defeated by the Olympians. These lumbering, brutish Titans found the divine child, and in a fit of primal rage, they tore him to pieces. In their ultimate act of profanity, they consumed his flesh, absorbing his divine essence. When Zeus discovered this horrific crime, his fury was absolute. He unleashed his mightiest weapon, a blazing thunderbolt, and utterly destroyed the Titans, reducing them to nothing but smoking ash. And it was from this very ash that humanity was born. This was the central, secret truth of Orphism. It meant that every single human being possessed a dual nature. From the ashes of the Titans, we inherited a sinful, earthly, and brutish body. This was our titanic nature, the source of our pride, our anger, and our foolish desires. But mixed within that ash was the consumed essence of the god Dionysus. And so, within each person, there also existed a divine, pure, and immortal soul. The Orphic life, therefore, was a constant struggle between these two warring parts of the self. The entire goal of their existence was to purify the divine Dionysian soul, and to suppress, starve, and ultimately conquer the the profane titanic body. This belief led them to a life of strict discipline. To purify the soul, one had to live a pure life. Orphics followed strict codes of conduct. They practiced asceticism, denying the body its indulgent pleasures. They were often, and most famously, vegetarian. To consume the flesh of an animal was to partake in the original sin of the Titans, the act of consumption. A simple meal of bread, olives, and fruit was not just a matter of diet. It was an act of worship, a way of declaring your allegiance with the divine soul over the hungry, titanic body. They would gather in secret to recite their sacred hymns, quiet chants that told the stories of the gods and reminded the initiates of their own divine spark trapped within their flesh. And they believed in a concept that was quite alien to mainstream Greek thought. They believed in metempsychosis, the transmigration of the soul. In other words, reincarnation. This was the mechanism of purification. One lifetime was not enough to cleanse the soul of its titanic stain. So, after death, the soul would be judged and then sent back to be reborn. It was trapped in what they called the grievous cycle. A soul might be reborn as a human, or even as an animal, forced to live life after life, imprisoned in a series of physical bodies. But with each life, there was an opportunity. If the soul lived a pure, orphic life, it would become a little cleaner, a little lighter, and after many, many cycles of rebirth, it could finally be purified completely. At that point, the soul could at last escape the grievous cycle. It would not be reborn again. It would achieve a permanent state of bliss, rejoining the gods in a state of eternal, divine consciousness. This was the ultimate promise of Orphism, not just a better afterlife, but an escape from the wheel of life and death altogether. To aid the soul on its journey, the Orphics created a kind of map. Initiates were sometimes buried with remarkable artifacts, now known as Orphic tablets. These were thin, delicate leaves of pure gold, about the size of an ivy leaf, and inscribed upon the soft metal, in tiny, careful Greek script, were a set of instructions for the departed soul. These tablets were a passport and a guidebook. They contained the secret knowledge needed to navigate the underworld successfully. They would tell the soul which path to take, which guardians to avoid. They would contain the sacred passwords that the soul could recite to Persephone, the queen of the underworld, to prove that it was a purified initiate. They often warned the soul not to drink from the springs of Lethe, of forgetfulness, but to seek, instead, the waters of Mnemosyne, the pool of memory, so that it could retain its sacred knowledge. This tiny, golden leaf, resting on the chest of a deceased follower, was the ultimate expression of their faith. It was a secret key to a secret door that led out of the prison of the world and into the endless light of the divine. This powerful idea of reincarnation and a soul's long journey after death was not confined to the secret gatherings of mystery cults. It was also explored in breathtaking detail by one of history's greatest and most influential philosophers. Let us now drift from the world of ritual and faith into the world of pure reason and philosophical imagination. We arrive at the feet of Plato, the great Athenian thinker, at the very end of his masterpiece, The Republic. After a long and complex discussion about the nature of justice, he tells a story. It is a story designed to illustrate the ultimate consequences of a just or an unjust life. It is not presented as religious fact, but as a philosophical allegory, a grand and intricate vision of the cosmos. It is the myth of. The story begins with a soldier from a land called Pamphylia, whose name was Ah. He was a brave man who was thought to have been killed in a great battle. His body was recovered and placed upon a funeral pyre with his fallen comrades. But 12 days after his supposed death, as the flames were about to be lit, Ah suddenly awoke. He was unharmed. He then recounted the most incredible story. He explained that his soul had journeyed to the afterlife, but that he had been chosen by the judges to be a messenger. He was sent back to report to all of humanity what he had seen of the world beyond. I described being led to a wondrous and divine place where there were 2 great openings in the earth and 2 in the sky. It was here that the souls of the dead were judged. He watched as the souls of the just were sent up into the heavens through one of the openings in the sky to enjoy 1,000 years of blissful reward for their virtue. And he saw the souls of the unjust dragged down into the earth through one of the chasms below to suffer 1,000 years of punishment, paying a 10-fold price for every wrong they had committed in life. After their 1,000-year journey was complete, whether in bliss or in torment, all the souls gathered together again in a great meadow. From there, they traveled to the very center of the cosmos. They arrived at the spindle of necessity. This was the cosmic instrument that turned the heavens. Ud described it as a giant, spinning whirl with a series of 8 smaller whirls nested inside one another, each one representing the orbit of the sun, the moon, and the planets. And as the spindle turned, it hummed with a celestial harmony, the legendary music of the spheres. And attending this cosmic machinery were the 3 fates: Lachesis, the one who measures the past; Clotho, the one who spins the present; and Atropos, the one who cuts the thread of the future. It was here, before these powerful beings, that the souls would make the most important choice of all. A celestial herald would take parcels containing the lots of all possible future lives and cast them upon the ground before the gathered souls. There were lives of every kind: the life of a king, the life of a tyrant, the life of a poet, the life of a private citizen. There were even the lives of animals: a lion, a swan, an ape, and each soul was free to choose its next life. Plato describes this scene with a philosopher's eye for human nature. He notes that many souls chose poorly. Those who had come from the 1,000 years of heavenly reward, having never truly suffered, were often tempted by the lots that promised great power and wealth, like the life of a tyrant. They did not have the wisdom to understand the misery that such a life would bring. Conversely, many who had just endured 1,000 years of punishment sought out lives of simplicity and virtue. The great hero, Odysseus, having learned the painful lessons of a life filled with war and turmoil, searched long and hard for the most humble lot of all: the quiet, simple, and unnoticed life of a private citizen. Once a soul had made its choice, it was irreversible. Each soul was then assigned a guardian spirit, a daimon, who would accompany them through their next life to ensure their chosen fate was fulfilled. They were then led, one by one, under the great throne of the goddess Necessity. The final stage of their cosmic journey had begun. They were all made to march across the barren and desolate plain of Lethe. They traveled to the banks of the river of forgetfulness, and here they were all required to drink a certain measure of its water. As they drank the clear, placid water, all memory of their past life and of their incredible journey through the cosmos was wiped clean. The messenger, was forbidden from drinking. He had to remember. As night fell, and the souls fell into a deep sleep, a great earthquake and thunder shook the plain, and the souls were suddenly launched upwards, like shooting stars, to their new births and their new beginnings. It is a story of profound and beautiful complexity, a vision of a cosmos governed by justice, where souls are not passive victims of fate, but active participants in the creation of their own destiny. While philosophers and mystics pondered the soul's cosmic journey, others in the ancient world sought a much more immediate and practical connection with those who had passed. They sought a way to stand at the edge of the world and speak to the dead. We drift now from the high-minded realm of philosophy to the dark and earthy world of ritual magic. The ancient Greeks held a deep respect and a profound fear for the dead, but they also believed that it was possible to communicate with them, not to raise them back to life, but to call them to the threshold between worlds, to seek their wisdom and their knowledge of the future. This practice was known as Nikia, an evocative term for a ritual of consulting the dead. The most famous and most detailed account of this ritual comes from Book 11 of Homer's great epic, the Odyssey. The hero, Odysseus, needs to consult the spirit of the blind prophet, Tiresias, to learn how he can finally find his way home. To do this, he must sail to the fog-shrouded land of the Cimmerians, a place at the very edge of the world, where the sun never shines, and here, under a moonless sky, he performs the Nikia. Following the precise instructions given to him by the sorceress Circe, Odysseus begins. First, he uses his sharp bronze sword to dig a pit in the dark earth, about a 4 arms length, deep and wide. Into this pit he pours a series of libations, offerings meant to appease the spirits. First, a mixture of honey and milk, then sweet wine, and finally, pure water. He sprinkles white barley over the offerings, and then makes a solemn vow to the dead, promising to make a great sacrifice to them once he returns home. But the most important part of the ritual comes next. He takes 2 sheep, a ram and a whey, both pure black, the color of the underworld. He sacrifices them, ensuring that their dark, rich blood flows directly into the pit. This blood is the key. It is a symbol of life, a potent and irresistible lure for the shades of the dead, who are witless and cold, and long for even a momentary taste of the warmth and vitality they have lost. As the blood pools in the trench, they begin to arrive. Emerging from the darkness of Erebus, the deep shadow, come the translucent, fluttering forms of the dead. They are silent and ghostly, and they press forward, eager to drink from the pit. But Odysseus knows that they are mindless in this state. They cannot speak or even recognize him. They are driven only by a primal thirst, so he must draw his sword and hold them back. It is a tense and terrifying vigil. He stands guard over his offering, a living man, using his weapon not to fight, but to create a barrier between the worlds, holding back the pathetic, thirsty crowd. He must wait until the soul he wishes to consult, the prophet Tiresias, finally appears. Only then does he allow that specific shade to approach and to drink the dark blood. The effect is immediate. Upon drinking, the spirit of the prophet regains his memory and his consciousness. His ghostly voice, which was once just a witless whisper, grows clearer and more human. He recognizes Odysseus. He is able to speak, to listen, and to share his prophecy. This powerful scene shows a deep belief that the dead possessed knowledge, but that accessing it was a difficult and dangerous process. It was not a casual conversation. It was a forbidden act that required careful ritual and immense courage. This practice was not confined to epic poetry. There were real places in ancient Greece that were known as oracles of the dead. The most famous of these was located at Ephyra, near the very real river Acheron, a place already believed to be a physical gateway to Hades. Pilgrims would travel to this dark and subterranean shrine, and through rituals of sensory deprivation and powerful offerings, they would attempt to call up the spirits of their ancestors to seek their guidance. It was a practice born from a universal human desire, the need to believe that the wisdom of our loved ones is not truly lost to us forever. These intricate and powerful beliefs of Hades and its rivers, of reincarnation and judgment, of consulting the dead, did not simply vanish with the fall of ancient Greece. They were so compelling, so deeply resonant, that they were adopted and adapted by the next great Mediterranean power, ensuring that their echoes would be heard for millennia to come. Our journey is now in its final moments. We have explored the geography, the mythology, and the secret philosophies of the Greek afterlife. For our final reflection, we drift forward in time. We watch as the light of classical Greece begins to fade, and a new power rises in its place. The Roman Empire. The Romans, in matters of culture and religion, were great admirers of the Greeks, and so they did not conquer and erase the Greek underworld. Instead, they absorbed it through a process called syncretism. They blended the Greek myths with their own native beliefs, creating a new but deeply familiar vision of the afterlife. The Greek god Hades, the solemn king of the underworld, was given new Roman names. He became Pluto, a name derived from the Greek word for wealth, Plauton, suggesting his dominion over the treasures hidden within the earth. He was also known as Dispotter, or simply Orcus, but his character, his realm, and his story remained largely the same. The grim ferryman, Charon, kept his name and his role. The great rivers, Styx, Acheron, and Lethe, all continued to flow through the Roman imagination with their Greek names intact. The most complete and influential Roman vision of the underworld is found in the 6th book of their great national epic, Virgil's Aeneid. This book is heavily and intentionally modeled on the 11th book of Homer's Odyssey. Just as Odysseus journeyed to the edge of the underworld, the Roman hero Aeneas must make a full descent into its depths to consult the spirit of his dead father. Virgil's underworld is a magnificent creation. It is more moralized than the Homeric version, with a much clearer separation of the realms for the good, the average, and the wicked. His vision of Tartarus, with its towering walls and its terrible punishments, was particularly vivid, and became the definitive image of hell for centuries. But Virgil also added a distinctly Roman purpose to the journey. The underworld became a place where Roman destiny was revealed. Aeneas is shown a great parade of his future descendants, the souls of the great heroes and leaders of Rome, all waiting on the banks of the Lethe, ready to be born. The Roman vision of the afterlife was therefore not just about individual justice. It was about the grand historical destiny of their people. And as the centuries passed, and the Roman Empire itself began to embrace a new faith, Christianity, these powerful classical images did not disappear. They were adapted and recontextualized. The Greek term Hades became a word used in the New Testament to refer to the Christian concept of hell, And when the great medieval poets and artists sought to depict the Christian afterlife, they often reached back into the deep well of classical imagery. The most famous example, of course, is the Italian poet Dante Alighieri and his masterpiece, the Inferno. Dante's hell is populated with familiar figures from the Greek underworld. The first being he meets on his journey into the abyss is Charon, still poling his boat across the Acheron. The great judge of his hell is Minos, who wraps his serpentine tail around himself to indicate which circle the sinner must be cast down to. Cerberus, the three-headed hound, still guards the damned. The punishments that Dante imagines are often direct echoes of the punishments of Tartarus. The Greek underworld provided a powerful and enduring framework for understanding sin, justice, and damnation. And even the more pleasant aspects of the Greek afterlife have lingered. The idea of the Elysian fields and the mythical land of Arcadia influenced centuries of Western art and literature. They became the foundation for our ideas of paradise, a perfect pastoral landscape of peace and beauty. The legacy of the Greek underworld is a testament to its incredible power as a story. It was a complete and complex world, a framework for understanding the deepest questions of life, death, and morality. A story so compelling that its echoes have never truly left us. They are in our art, our literature, and the very foundations of our thought. And so, our long journey through the world that awaits comes to a close. From the personal passage of a single soul to the vast cosmic maps of philosophers, the ancient Greeks looked into the darkness of death and found not a void, but a world of profound meaning, order, and mystery. Their stories have become our stories, their underworld a foundation for our own dreams of what lies beyond. Thank you for joining me on this voyage tonight. I hope it has brought you peace and calm. If you feel so inclined, your support on Patreon helps these stories continue. But for now, the most important thing is for you to rest. So let the last echoes of this ancient world fade. There is nothing left to do now but sleep. Good night.